There is a question that can hold onto your heart long after someone has left your life. What is the narcissist thinking about me right now? Perhaps you have asked yourself that exact question in the middle of the night. You may have wondered if they miss your presence, if they feel any regret for hurting you, or if they finally realize what they lost. Maybe you wonder if your silence confuses them, or if they secretly expect you to return. You might find yourself watching their behavior from a distance, trying to make sense of every post, every message, every silence, every sudden appearance, or every new person in their life. Underneath all of those persistent questions, there is often another thought that hurts even deeper. Did I ever really matter to them? If you have found yourself caught in this cycle of thinking, please understand something essential. Wondering about their thoughts does not mean you are weak. It simply means your mind is working to make sense of a deeply confusing experience. When a relationship is filled with inconsistency, where affection is followed by sudden rejection, closeness turns into distance, praise becomes criticism, and promises lead to constant disappointment, your brain cannot just turn off its feelings overnight. Your mind craves a clear explanation. Your nervous system craves predictability. Your heart wants the story to make sense. Today, we are going to look at this situation from a fresh perspective. Instead of obsessing over what a narcissistic person might be thinking, we are going to explore the psychological patterns that occur when someone realizes that you are changing. We will look at what happens when they no longer have the same emotional access to you. What they think about you often has very little to do with your appearance, your accomplishments, or how quickly you are moving on with your life. Instead, it comes down to one core reality. You are no longer responding to them in the way you used to. When you stop playing the role you were conditioned to play, the entire relationship dynamic shifts into unfamiliar territory. Think back to the person you were while you were in that relationship. You might have found yourself constantly explaining your choices, trying over and over to prove your love, or apologizing for things that were never your fault. You may have checked your phone constantly because you never knew when they would pull away. You became hyper-aware of their mood swings. You learned to spot the subtle difference between their short text messages and their longer ones. You paid close attention to their tone of voice and watched their facial expressions closely. Every single day, you tried to predict whether you would be dealing with a good day or a difficult one. Without even realizing it, you began organizing your entire life around their emotional state. If they were angry, you became cautious and careful. If they withdrew, you tried harder to get close. If they blamed you for something, you rushed to defend yourself. If they suddenly showered you with affection, you felt a massive wave of relief. This constant cycle is why emotionally confusing relationships are so completely draining. Your focus is constantly pulled outward. Instead of asking yourself how you feel, you start asking how they feel. Instead of asking what you need, you ask what they need from you. Instead of asking if the relationship is actually good for you, you focus entirely on keeping them happy. Slowly and silently, your own inner world gets pushed to the side. Now, consider what happens when you begin to change. Imagine that the person who used to reply instantly now takes their time to respond. Imagine the person who used to defend every decision now gives a simple, direct answer. Imagine the person who used to chase after peace now calmly says that they need space. Imagine the person who used to be crushed by criticism now simply says that they disagree. Imagine the person who tolerated disrespect suddenly putting an end to the conversation. Imagine the person who relied on outside approval starting to trust their own mind and judgment. The other person may have no idea how to handle this transformation. They might wonder why you are acting so differently now. They might ask themselves why they can no longer get the same reactions out of you. They might view your calm emotional control as coldness, treat your healthy boundaries like an attack, or view your growing independence as personal rejection. In reality, what they are seeing is the very beginning of your healing journey. When you change, the first thought that often crosses the mind of someone with strong narcissistic traits is centered on why they can no longer get that familiar reaction from you. That thought is significant because emotional reactions are what fuel unhealthy relationship dynamics. Think about how the dynamic used to play out. Every time they criticized you, you immediately defended yourself. They would criticize you again, and you would offer even more detailed explanations. They would twist your words, and you would keep trying to clarify your meaning. By the end of it, you were completely exhausted, while they had received hours of your undivided attention and emotional energy. Or think about what happened when they withdrew their affection. Every time a disagreement came up, your anxiety flared, leading you to apologize just to restore peace. As soon as you apologized, their affection returned. Over time, your brain was taught that pursuing them was the only way to bring back safety and connection. Then, the cycle would start all over again. This behavior is not always a consciously calculated plan on their part. Human behavior is reinforced naturally through repetition. If a specific action repeatedly yields attention, reassurance, deep emotional energy, or total compliance, that action becomes a permanent feature of how they interact with you. When you stop reacting, the entire system breaks down. You do not have to become mean or cruel. You do not need to insult them or play mind games. You simply stop making your emotional energy available for unhealthy interactions. That simple change holds incredible power. You slowly begin to realize that not every false accusation requires a long defense. Not every misunderstanding needs a lengthy explanation. Not every attempt to provoke you deserves an emotional outburst. Not every retreat requires you to chase after them. You do not need to prove your innocence for the 10th time. Eventually, you reach a point where you realize that you have explained yourself enough, recognizing that truth is often where your true freedom begins. They might continue to think about how much you used to care about their opinion. That part may be completely true. You cared deeply about what they thought because you loved them sincerely. You wanted the relationship to succeed, and you truly believed that clear communication could solve your problems. You believed that if they could just understand your true intentions, they would start treating you with care. You believed that if you became more patient, more supportive, more forgiving, or more loving, the relationship would eventually become a safe place for you. However, many people eventually discover a hard and painful truth. You cannot love someone into taking emotional accountability. You cannot communicate someone into having self-awareness. You cannot sacrifice your own well-being to build mutuality with someone who is unwilling to meet you halfway. This does not mean that people are incapable of change. People can and do change when they develop real insight, take full responsibility for their actions, seek the right kind of help, and consistently work to alter their behavior over time. But you cannot do that hard internal work for another adult. You cannot carry their self-awareness for them. You cannot apologize on their behalf. You cannot manage their emotions for them. You cannot spend your entire life trying to help someone understand the damage of their actions while they refuse to look in the mirror. That refusal is precisely why they can become so deeply confused when you simply stop trying. For a very long time, they may have viewed you as the person who would always keep explaining, always keep forgiving, always keep returning, always keep hoping, and always give yet another chance. Then, one day, something fundamental changes inside of you. It does not mean you suddenly stopped caring overnight. You might still care deeply. You might still miss them on certain days. You might still cry or fondly remember the good moments you shared. But a deeper shift has occurred within your core. You have come to realize that missing someone does not mean you should go back to them. Loving someone does not mean you have to endure endless mistreatment. Feeling guilty does not automatically mean that you did something wrong. And wanting closure does not mean you need to reopen a door that caused you pain. This realization is where true emotional maturity takes root. Emotional maturity is not about wiping away your feelings. It is the wisdom to experience your emotions fully without letting every single feeling dictate your actions. You can miss someone deeply while firmly maintaining your boundaries. You can feel profound sadness and still keep taking steps forward. You can sincerely wish someone well without inviting them back into your personal life. You can cherish the beautiful memories without pretending the painful moments never happened. You can understand the reasons behind someone's behavior without excusing the harm it caused. These distinctions are vital because toxic relationships often push us into rigid all-or-nothing thinking. You might worry that acknowledging any good qualities in them means you are denying the harm they caused. Or you might worry that admitting you still love them means you are weak. Neither of those things is true. Healing is a complex and layered process. When you step away from the cycle, you allow yourself to regain the perspective you lost. You begin to understand that your worth was never defined by their ability to see it, and your peace does not depend on their approval. As you continue to move forward, you build a life grounded in clarity, self-respect, and genuine emotional security. You can hold two truths in your mind at the exact same time. There were moments that you genuinely valued and cherished, and yet the relationship was still fundamentally unhealthy for you. You cared deeply about this person, and you still need to maintain distance from them. You missed the person you hoped they would turn out to be, and you recognize that you cannot build your future around potential alone. Perhaps you assume that because you are thinking about them, the narcissistic person must still be sitting there thinking about you as well. This is precisely where you need to be very careful with your mind. You can easily spend an enormous amount of emotional energy wondering whether they are thinking about you simply because they are occupying your thoughts. However, your internal thoughts do not tell you what is happening in their mind. Your deep longing does not prove that they feel longing. Your vivid memories do not prove that they share those same memories. What they choose to post on social media does not provide a reliable window into their private inner world. Human beings are naturally meaning-making creatures. Whenever we feel emotionally activated or anxious, we start searching everywhere for clues. A random song suddenly feels like an intentional message. A public post feels like a subtle signal. A period of silence feels like concrete evidence. A new photograph becomes immediate proof of their ultimate happiness or unhappiness. Sometimes a simple post is just a post. Sometimes silence is just silence. Frequently, you simply do not have enough information to know what another human being is truly thinking. Learning to accept that uncertainty is a crucial part of your overall healing. You do not need to solve the complex mystery of another person's mind in order to reclaim your own mind. Read that thought again. You do not need to solve the mystery of another person's mind to reclaim your own. Maybe they miss you, or maybe they do not. Maybe they are holding on to anger, or maybe they are completely indifferent. Maybe they experience genuine regret, or maybe they are telling themselves a completely altered version of the story. You may never truly know the answer, but your personal recovery cannot depend on finding out. If your peace of mind depends on them feeling regret, then they still hold control over your peace. If your confidence depends on them finally recognizing your worth, then they still maintain power over your self-esteem. If your healing depends on them admitting what they did wrong, then you are giving them a say in whether you ever heal. This brings us directly to one of the deepest psychological wounds that can form after surviving an emotionally manipulative relationship: That wound is the intense need for external validation. You may have spent endless hours hoping to hear them say that you were right, that they hurt you, that they finally understand, that you deserved better treatment, and that they should have acted differently. Hearing those exact words can feel like the only thing that would finally settle the exhausting argument inside your mind. The painful truth is that those words often never arrive. The person who caused you harm is rarely the person who brings you clarity about that harm. The person who created the confusion rarely delivers the explanation. The person who tore down your confidence is not going to be the one who rebuilds it. This is the moment where you must begin giving yourself everything you spent so long waiting for them to provide. You can stand firm and tell yourself that you believe what you experienced. You can remind yourself that you do not need someone else to agree with every single detail before you begin taking care of yourself. You are fully allowed to step away from situations that repeatedly leave you feeling unsafe, confused, diminished, or emotionally drained. You are allowed to choose your own peace of mind, even if someone else insists that you are wrong for doing so. Making those statements is not a sign of arrogance or pride. It is the fundamental practice of learning self-trust. At some point, they may wonder why you have suddenly become so independent and self-assured. This represents another crucial turning point in your journey. During a challenging and toxic relationship, you often gradually shrink your whole world to maintain stability. You stop talking to longtime friends because your partner expresses dislike for them. You give up on personal hobbies because they criticize them. You stop sharing your honest opinions because every disagreement leads to an exhausting conflict. You stop making independent choices because every decision turns into a major argument. You make yourself smaller and smaller just to keep the dynamic stable. After leaving that dynamic behind, you naturally begin to expand once again. You reach out and call an old friend. You begin exercising again. You sign up for a new class. You refocus on your long-term career goals. You rearrange and refresh your home. You travel to new places. You read books you love. You laugh freely. You fall asleep without anxiously waiting for someone else's mood to shift. You create plans for your future without worrying about how another person will react. You start discovering that the vibrant person you were before entering that relationship was never completely lost. That version of you was simply waiting patiently underneath all the survival strategies you had to adopt. This transition can feel confusing because true healing does not always look like a dramatic or cinematic event. Often, healing looks like going an entire afternoon without feeling the urge to check your phone. It looks like hearing their name mentioned and noticing that your body no longer tenses up the way it used to. Healing looks like remembering a past argument without feeling compelled to reanalyze every single sentence that was spoken. It looks like typing out a text message, realizing it does not serve you, and simply deleting the draft instead of sending it. It looks like refusing to explain your heart to someone who is actively committed to misunderstanding you. It looks like choosing to get a good night's sleep instead of staying up late analyzing what went wrong. These quiet, small shifts carry immense weight over time. Your nervous system learns and adapts through consistent repetition. Every time you practice setting a firm boundary and survive the temporary discomfort that follows, your trust in your boundaries grows stronger. Every time you make an independent decision and realize you can handle whatever outcome follows, your self-reliance builds. Every time you resist the intense urge to chase someone who pulls away, you learn that abandonment anxiety does not have to drive your actions. This is why your healing should never be measured solely by whether you have completely erased someone from your thoughts. Healing does not mean forgetting everything that occurred. Healing means remembering the past without being controlled or paralyzed by those memories. They might convince themselves that you are just acting out of anger toward them, and perhaps you do feel angry. Experiencing anger is not an immediate sign that you are bitter, toxic, or failing in your recovery. Anger often serves as crucial information from your inner self. It alerts you that something pushed past your personal values, violated your boundaries, or disregarded your basic sense of fairness. The goal is not to settle down and reside permanently in a state of anger. The real objective is to listen carefully to what your anger is trying to reveal, and then decide what meaningful action you want to take with that knowledge. If your anger is communicating that you must never tolerate mistreatment again, you can transform that anger into sharp personal discernment. If your anger highlights that you overlooked subtle warning signs in the past, you can use that insight to become far more attentive to behavior patterns moving forward. If your anger reveals that you abandoned your own needs to keep another person comfortable, you can convert that realization into a solid commitment to honor yourself. You do not need to convert your anger into revenge or conflict. You can quietly convert your anger into lasting wisdom. This is where your story grows infinitely stronger. While the narcissistic individual may be sitting there wondering whether they still hold influence over your life, you are actively learning to stop structuring your world around their influence. They might wonder whether you will pick up the phone when they reach out. Meanwhile, you are realizing that you are under no obligation to answer. They might wonder if you still crave their validation and approval. Meanwhile, you are learning how to validate and approve of yourself. They might wonder if you will eventually return to the old dynamic. Meanwhile, you are learning how to return to yourself. That final concept is something you should hold on to tightly. The most critical return you will ever make is not going back to the person who caused you pain. It is the journey of returning to your own true self. Reflect on how much of your essence was put on pause during that relationship. Your personal dreams were pushed aside. Your natural self-confidence vanished. You stopped trusting your gut instincts. You became completely consumed by the desire to be understood by a single person. You may have spent years trying to convince them to recognize your intrinsic worth. Your entire life cannot be reduced to one person's narrow opinion of you. One individual's inability to see your worth does not make you any less valuable. One person's failure to love you in a healthy, supportive way does not mean you are difficult to love. Rejection from one person does not get to dictate your identity. Their criticism does not stand as a permanent verdict on who you are. People with narcissistic tendencies will often reframe your clear boundaries as proof that you have become cold, selfish, or heartless. This tactic can trigger immense guilt, especially if you possess a deeply empathetic nature. When you are accustomed to being the person who constantly accommodates everyone else's demands, saying no can initially feel harsh or wrong. When you are used to managing everyone else's emotional comfort, stepping back can feel like an act of selfishness. When you are conditioned to apologize quickly to keep the peace, refusing to take the blame for something you did not do can feel downright terrifying. Feeling guilty and actually doing something wrong are two entirely different things. You can experience a heavy wave of guilt after setting a necessary, healthy boundary and still be doing the absolute best thing for your life. You can feel deeply uncomfortable saying no and still recognize that saying no is essential. You can allow someone else to feel disappointed while still making a deeply responsible choice for your well-being. This is a vital truth to absorb because manipulative dynamics actively train you to view another person's disappointment as immediate proof of your own failure. Another person's emotional reaction ultimately belongs to them. You can maintain genuine compassion for someone's feelings without handing over your boundaries or abandoning your self-respect. Consider a clear and straightforward example of how this plays out in daily life. Imagine having a friend who routinely calls you late at night, hurls subtle insults your way, demands your undivided emotional energy, and turns hostile whenever you are simply unavailable to talk. When you finally decide to establish a firm boundary by turning off your phone at night, they may accuse you of being an unsupportive friend. They may insist that you are acting selfishly or that you never truly cared about them. In that exact moment, your empathetic nature will want to step in, apologize, turn the phone back on, and fix their frustration. However, taking a step back allows you to see the situation clearly. You are not harming them by seeking a full night of rest. You are not being cruel by refusing to absorb late-night verbal insults. You are simply establishing a healthy boundary around your time, your peace, and your personal energy. Their disappointment stems entirely from losing the unlimited access they once had to your energy. It does not mean that your boundary was wrong. This same exact dynamic unfolds when you choose to step away from a narcissistic relationship. They may frame your silence as a form of punishment. They may claim that your distance proves you were the problem all along. They may tell others that you gave up easily or that you never genuinely loved them. These reactions are simply the predictable responses of someone who has lost access to a dynamic that previously served them. They are accustomed to a reality where you explain, apologize, adapt, and pursue. When you stop engaging in that familiar dance, the entire structure falls apart. You do not need to launch a campaign to correct their narrative. You do not need to convince their social circle of your side of the story. You do not need to win a debate against someone who uses words as tools for control rather than honest connection. Your quiet boundary speaks for itself. Your ongoing healing is all the proof you will ever need. Your peace of mind is the ultimate answer to every question they might still hold about you. As you continue moving forward, remind yourself that the goal is not to win an invisible competition over who cares less or who moves on faster. The true goal is to build a life where your sense of self is grounded within you, rather than anchored to the unstable reactions of someone else. You are gradually rebuilding your internal trust, step by step, choice by choice, and day by day. You are reclaiming your time, your mental bandwidth, your emotional energy, and your future. What they are thinking about you in this moment matters far less than what you are choosing to think about yourself. You are choosing clarity over constant confusion. You are choosing steady peace over unpredictable drama. You are choosing your own well-being over an unhealthy dynamic. That choice is where your strength resides, and that is where your genuine freedom ultimately begins.